So to introduce our panelists without further ado, we have Andrew Shearer, CEO of Farm Shelf. Give a wave there, Andrew. He is the founder and CEO of Farm Shelf. They're a Brooklyn-based startup helping people grow vegetables on bookshelf-like units. The company has raised over $8.5 million to date. They count Chef Jose Andres, current and former Fortune 500 CEOs, as well as Thai property developer Sansiri as some of their investors. The company has units in places such as the Brooklyn public schools, as well as restaurants, and counts on Chef Andres and Chef Marcus Samuelson as fans. And they recently launched their home version, which is available for pre-order now. We'll talk to Andrew about that. Next, we've got Stuart Oda. Give yourself a wave there, Stuart. Stuart is the founder and CEO of Alaska Life Technologies in Beijing. The company builds indoor vertical farms and farm management software and has projects across Asia and the Middle East, and soon Africa. They have raised several $1 million in a Series A round in 2017 and will start construction on large-scale indoor farms in China in the coming months. Stuart has also spoken at World Economic Forum and has also given a TED Talk on food and agriculture. And last but not least, we got Vikas Garg. Give yourself a wave there, Vikas. He's the founder and CEO of A Billion Veg. They are a Singapore-based company, an internet platform on a mission to help 1 billion people go vegan by the year 2030. Vikas launched A Billion Veg after 15 years in finance and government and is a dedicated sponsor of education and conservation initiatives around the world. The company has raised $4 million so far and counts Silicon Valley-based 500 startups amongst its investors as they led their seed round of funding. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I think the best way to do this is just to kind of dive right into it. You know, the world is changing, COVID aside, but you know, the way climate change is going and just the way consumption trends were going. Stuart, I was watching your TED Talk earlier and just some interesting statistics that you had in it that I wanted to share with everyone. But by 2050, there's going to be almost 10 billion people in the world, and about 2/3 of those will live in urban areas. We will need to increase our agricultural output by about 70% from current levels. In other words, we need to grow more food in the next 35 to 40 years than the previous 10,000 years combined. And 1/3 of all food that we actually produce goes to waste due to spoilage or just problems in the supply chain, or just people forgetting to, you know, leaving stuff in the refrigerator and whatnot. Agricultural production in the traditional sense is also accounts for about 70% of fresh water usage around the world. So I guess the first question, Andrew and Stuart, since you guys are both in kind of the hydroponics urban farming space, those statistics kind of really seem scary, and it really, you know, feels like the way the world is going that, you know, we might fall short, or that we're not going fast enough towards hitting those targets. So what, you know, it really necessitates the need for your technology. So what are some of the things that you guys are doing to help consumers adapt to the various products and ecosystems that you guys are looking to create? I guess we'll start with Stuart.
Yeah, sure. So I guess just to kind of take one step back, the pandemic, and maybe one of the interesting things that has happened is a lot of investment and focus has been in food tech up until now. And food and agriculture are on the opposite ends of the supply chain. So food is what you can get at the grocery store, food is what you can get at the restaurants. And agriculture is essentially the production, the processing, logistics of that food. And what's interesting is a lot of the focus around food tech, which is more focused on convenience, has shifted towards ag tech, which is more based on resilience. So a lot of the things that we're seeing right now, and kind of the interest from governments and even our customers and partners, is how can we build resilience? How can we make investments into capacity building? And one of the major things that we try to do is we just try to make it easy. So how can we develop our technology in a way, you know, that offers the kind of capacity building and resilience, but also offers, you know, they don't have to make such a big trade-off in terms of costs and operations. And so A lot of our innovation has been on, the utility around the technology, making it very, very easy to operate. But also the output of the product is not extremely expensive. As you'd imagine, indoor farming has a lot of different components that go into it that make it more expensive than field-based farming. And so we try to really focus on both the hardware and software development that allows, our cost of energy and cost of labor to be as low as possible, so that, in the near future, we can be cost comparable to greenhouses, and in the future, we can be cost comparable to field farms.
Right. Andrew, one of the things, you guys just launched your home unit, you've had the commercial unit, and, we've talked about this before, but, just the kind of the cost metrics and everything, tell us a little bit more about, Farm Shelf and how you guys are going about it in a similar way like Stuart.
Yeah, so with Farm Shelf, it's really enabling anyone to grow food where they live, work, and eat, and automating the hardest parts and really providing that joy. The cost is important, and when we look at a lot of the costs in, for example, the U.S. food system, you're looking at like a head of lettuce that is sold by a grower for 45 cents, ending up in a grocery store for $2. And just think about that, like, do you focus on the 45 cents or the $1.55? And so much of our food is this logistics costs of multiple middlemen, grocery store, and not just getting from the farm to the grocery store, but then the grocery store to your home. And so with us, it's been looking at, how do we solve that problem for cost? But what we lose in that whole traveling period and across those different handoff points is flavor. Vegetables taste amazing and they are so good. And it's been so much fun to watch people taste our arugula or our basil and just light up, these chefs that are just like, wow, that's what I've been searching for, that flavor. And I think that is what is going to change the way that we move towards, more sustainable diets, is great tasting food and people kind of rediscovering, just how great vegetables can be. And that vertical farming, like Farm Shelf and, like Alaska Life with Stuart, are hopefully going to help Vikas's mission of a billion vegans because we make it taste so good, or just be a small part of that solution. And so when it comes to kind of all those crazy stats, luckily there's a lot of optimization left to be done in the system in terms of the transportation miles, the food waste, and the nutrient levels. So for growing with indoor farming, you're going to be looking at, one bite of lettuce having the same nutrients as today in a grocery store is going to be 2 bites on top of like the 50% reduction in like produce wasted globally. So very hopeful and excited. But at the end of the day, I think it has to go beyond cost and into flavor, experience, and appreciation for that food and that produce in a unique way.
Yeah, and I when I visited you guys in Brooklyn Navy Yards last year, I remember we just kind of ripped open the Farm Shelf case and had some herb or microgreen that I don't think I've ever had before. And it really does, it tasted completely different, and it really does allow chefs to play around with the ingredients where they otherwise might not have. Vikas, I want to come to you. The mission that you're on, 1 billion plant-based consumers, we're maybe a little bit like halfway there if you count vegetarians as part of that. But, just the way the world is heading and what Andrew and Stuart are doing, how does your company and your platform come in to really support that mission?
Yeah, sure. So we need, a lot of people say we need a lot more food because the world population is growing, but I'd like to just reflect on that for a second. It's more of a case of the 1% more than anything. So today we have income inequality in America. It's vast. We have income inequality in lots of places around the world. We also have food inequality. We have 1 billion people around the world today that will not be having dinner tonight. And we have 1 billion people around the world today that are obese. So are we supposed to just grow more food for the 1 billion people that don't have food? Well, what if we just looked at something else? 1/3 of agricultural land worldwide is used for growing livestock feed. 1/3 of corn that's produced in America and 40% of grain worldwide is used to feed livestock. And 75% of the world's soy is also used to feed livestock. And ironically, the cultivation of all this livestock feed and cattle itself is the world's largest single cause of deforestation. So we have a lot of food. And while it's true that we have an expected population growth to 8.6 billion people over, the next 10 years by 2030, this world hunger problem is not going to go away. It's just going to be exacerbated. And the fact that we have 30-40% of our food wasted in cities, and we have continued rapid urbanization of the world and of the planet, that's also not going to go away, right? But what's really interesting is if we just take a little bit of the food that we already make and we just utilize it better in terms of really helping people kind of change their preferences, change their dietary preferences. And today you have the kinds of options that are helping people do that more often. In addition, you have a healthcare industry, you have health issues, you have diabetes, you have diseases around the world, not to mention things like COVID, bird flu, swine flu, HIV, Ebola, bubonic plague. All of these things have been caused because of our relationship with wildlife and with the fact that we farm animals for food. So I think that there's a huge growing emergence around the world, and a sort of a new understanding of the role that food has, not only in sustaining ourselves, but also in terms of sustainability. And that's really, really profound. So what we're building is we're building a digital platform. We're building the ecosystem for all of this growth. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of companies on our platform from around the world. We have, hundreds of thousands of consumers who've signed up to our platform around the world in about 130 countries. And what we're doing is we're just helping people find and access plant-based food and, sustainable consumer products wherever they might be and kind of wherever they are on their journey. We think that a big part of enjoying this kind of lifestyle more often is finding access, being accessible. So, we need to support businesses, we need to support consumers, and we need to meet people wherever they are. And that's what our platform is all about.
Right. And that, increasing that access, that's kind of where Farm Shelf and Alaska Life and, Andrew and Sort's companies come into play. But Andrew, you guys, we talked about the cost, and Vikas kind of mentioned, the food inequality that we have. You guys are doing work with Brooklyn Public Schools, for instance. How does Farm Shelf and a solution like yours, and Stuart, feel free to chime in here after this, but how does a solution like yours actually help bring the cost down and make food and vegetables, nutrient-dense food, more accessible to lower income individuals and families around the world?
Well, one thing I wanted to also thanks Vikas for those awesome stats, and I love that perspective of too often, especially in a lot of, I think, the media, it is focused on these kind of sometimes dietary fads that don't talk about this like greater population that is not being talked about enough in terms of in some ways like food justice, and not only around just like availability of food in terms of hunger, but also of nutrients. We have enough calories in the world, and we don't have enough nutritious food in the world. I mean, it's crazy to see just like the vitamin A deficiencies, for example, throughout most countries, with the exception of North America and most of Europe, just due to like the types of diets that have naturally evolved there, and seen in indoor farming, growing lettuce that has 100% more vitamin A, and the freshness of that produce being able to change so much there has been really exciting and hopeful to see. And Curtis, to get to your question of making this accessible, I think with looking at that, it's realizing that we are starting with more luxury clients, for the most part, restaurants, corporate cafeterias, hotels, but also working with schools and public schools to do education, K through 12 STEM education, so that kids can learn about the value of food, taste vegetables early on, develop those flavors even earlier in their life. And to get to that point where this is truly something that is accessible to everyone is going to take a few things that, just in this prep call, we heard Stuart talking about the important early stages, like setting up manufacturing at scale and really scaling this technology, training people and making it easier and easier to operate. And then on top of that, solving that logistics challenge. And, you know, in the US, the food is shipped on average 1,500 miles to get to your plate. And that's an interesting stat, but let's just talk about that. Imagine if like every time you wanted a head of lettuce, someone jumped on a flight, you know, halfway across the country. I mean, it's obviously not that expensive because it's going via like a refrigerated semi truck. But another analogy that I like to tell people just how crazy that is in the early 1800s, we used to ship ice via trains and barges. Imagine if you went and told your mom or dad you're starting an ice shipping company. They'd look at you like you're crazy. They'd be like, what? No, we have an ice maker. Or no, like just go to the store and pick up a bag of ice. Like it's around the corner. And they're not shipping ice. And so like, why should we be shipping produce when it can be grown where we are? Your farm shouldn't be across the country for your highly perishable, highly nutritious foods. It should be across the street or in your neighborhood. And by making it accessible in their neighborhood and giving those neighborhoods pride over that, I think you also then drive buy-in through an adoption that can really change a diet in a way that's so emotional and tactile. Tactile, not tactical.
Yeah, and Stuart, I mean, you know, Andrew, you know, you talked about you guys are kind of going after that more kind of luxury segment, and you know, the home unit that you launched, you know, I believe the price tag on that one is over $4,000, almost $5,000. But really, I mean, people would have the vegetables in their kitchen. I mean, you're talking not 1,500 miles, you're talking maybe 1,500 inches from the farm shelf to the cutting board. But Stuart, you guys, you know, you do these farms and shipping containers, and you know that definitely cuts down on the shipping and you know logistics costs. But you know, how can cities really utilize your technology to really build you know commercial stuff at scale in a major way? Like how can a country like Singapore, which wants to produce 30% of its food needs domestically by you know 2030, how can they leverage that sort of technology to meet the needs?
Yeah, sure. But just real quick, Andrew made a good point about shipping ice across the country. And if you really think about like iceberg lettuce, for example, you're talking about something that is like virtually all water and a little bit of fiber. And moving water in such a perishable, damageable form is hugely wasteful, and also, you know, not just from a logistical standpoint, but in terms of from a financial perspective as well. And so, kind of growing certain products locally makes a lot of sense, both environmentally and financially. And from our perspective, you know, kind of we're in the emerging markets where, you know, the majority of the population is significantly less affluent than, let's say, the US or the UK or, you know, or parts of Japan or even Singapore for that matter. And so finding a way where it's convenient, it's accessible, and they're incredibly price sensitive. So pricing in, or to be able to grow things in a way that's, you know, that they can afford is very important. But one of the things that we're trying to do to really integrate this into the city at scale is actually this really interesting phenomenon that's happening, and COVID-19 is actually exacerbating this. But Uber's competitor in China has taken several million cars off the road, and because of the way in which people now use share, you know, they ride share, they go from their house to the mall to watch a movie or maybe even to buy groceries, but the car continues the journey. And so the parking spaces that have been allocated at these malls or at the hotels, these places of commercial business, are becoming abandoned or underutilized. And so one of our biggest farms for the longest time in Beijing was in an underground parking lot, like literally underneath the feet of these hotels that we're servicing. And so what we're finding is that urban infrastructure is transforming in ways that are unlocking, you know, kind of prime locations, prime real estate, you know, that can allow urban farming operations like ours to thrive, even in a place like Beijing, where there's over 20 million people. Like the density here compared to many of the cities in the States is unbelievable. But even in a place like this, we're finding a lot of locations in the middle of the city that can allow us to, you know, to integrate this in ways that can help to reutilize, you know, really to you know, to better utilize, you know, all this infrastructure that was built to support an industry that is now, you know, is transforming the urban landscape. And because of coronavirus, if you imagine, corporate office spaces are becoming abandoned, and so there's just so much kind of this change in mentality about what real estate is meant for, what kind of activities can take place in the middle of the city is also changing as well. So before, where we grow food and where we consume food was typically considered almost mutually exclusive in the context of a city and a farm. But now, if you can imagine a city residing on top of a farm, it's very exciting to think about. And hopefully, as our technology evolves, we're going to be able to do some of these things at much bigger scale.
For sure. Vikas, I want to go to you real quick and talk about, how a lot of this is, you have Andrew and Stuart with the technology and the capabilities to help us grow food closer to where we consume it. But one of the biggest things that we need to do is actually change the consumer mindset and the behavior. And, you gave some interesting points and statistics there on food wastage and food inequality. But how are you guys going about changing kind of the consumer's perspective of vegan food or plant-based food? And, one of the largest markets, 25% of the world's meat eaters are in China. How do you go after a market like that and convince them that, vegetables, eat more vegetables? I mean, I remember in 2006 being in central China and almost eating a raw vegetable, and somebody came over and yelled at me in Chinese, "Don't eat that, you're gonna die." I was like, I just want a salad. How do you go about changing those consumer sentiments that are so ingrained, culturally?
Well, just to address, first of all, just the Chinese cuisine thing, I think it's interesting because I think if you put it in the historical context, Chinese diets even were very, very plant-based, 100 years back, right? They went through a famine. Coming out of that famine, all sorts of crazy things started to happen in terms of the kinds of foods that were available or introduced into that market. But if you go to a place like, you go to Sichuan, for example, and you go to Chengdu, which if any of us on the panel, if anybody dialing in likes spicy food, go to Chengdu.
Great food city, by the way. Great food.
Great, amazing food city. And my father-in-law is from Chengdu, and most of the food that today has pork in it or that has chicken in it is also made in a very traditional way when they didn't have these sort of things. They didn't have pork in their diets very often. Made 100% in a way vegetarian or even vegan. And, I talked to one of our investors who's in Malaysia, who tells me that his grandfather used to tell him that, and he's vegan, and his grandfather told him that, like, if they were lucky, they'd have a couple of eggs every few months, and they'd have chicken or they'd have pork or pigs. This is in the 1950s. They'd have that maybe once every 6 months if they were lucky. And they weren't exactly poor, but they were probably somewhere in between that and middle class. So I think that food as a culture has really changed with the industrialization of food, right? And that goes for both kinds of food. We're not just talking about the sort of a vegan agenda here, right? There's a reason why when you go to the inner city in South LA, for example, or parts of Brooklyn or parts of Queens, where I grew up, and you walk into a grocery store, the whole middle of the grocery store is boxed, right? It's stuff in boxes. There's a reason for that, right? And so the industrialization of food, whether you think about factory farming or you think about processed foods, and to the point on nutrition, right? The point that Andrew was making, I think that those are all really, really valid. Now, what do? Well, we use consumer data. We're ultimately a platform for user-generated content. I created this business in 2017, stepped away from something that I absolutely loved and was very passionate about to really focus on something that was really more aligned with my values and virtues in life. But at the time, I really felt like there was an opportunity to build a social media platform that really stood for social good, right? We had just come out of the 2016 election. We saw sort of what platforms like Facebook and Twitter, what role they played in that election. We saw a whole host of other issues, social issues, and I just felt like there was really an opportunity to build a platform that, yes, takes consumer data, but then leverages consumer data, leverages user-generated content to actually benefit the world and change the world in a positive way. So I grew up in New York City, and as a banker, I had to take a lot of guys from Minnesota out to steakhouses when they they came to New York to do deals with us. And so I went to a lot of steakhouses, and I always remember having that conversation with the maitre d', with the staff, with the owner, with the manager, and I showed up, right? And I'd even bring my parents back if they made me really great food that I could eat. And I think that it was really that concept that at the heart of what we do in terms of changing the hearts and minds of businesses. What we do is we take every single consumer review, every post that's generated, and every post that's generated, created by users on our platform is created about either a brand or about like a restaurant or a hotel. Our objective is to share every single one of those reviews back with those business owners. So globally, on our platform today, we have reviews. We have about 90,000 vegan dishes reviewed at about 31,000 restaurants. And for those 31,000 restaurants, we have 82% of them. For 82% of them, we are in contact on a weekly basis. I mean, we've automated this process, but last year we sent out 500,000 emails. This year we'll send out 10 million emails. And we've automated this process of really delivering that consumer feedback along with tips and suggestions. And not only that, but we'll send, let's say you're a Japanese restaurant in New York City, we're going to send you the best rated vegan food from all of your competitors, other Japanese restaurants in New York City. We're sending those to you on a weekly basis. And the idea is really about how do you use consumer advocacy as a tool to effectuate change and influence businesses. And what we want, our goal ultimately is, hey, we want you to have great plant-based options, right? We want you to make money. And we think that we can deliver customers to your business, right? If you have great plant-based options. So it's really a very reciprocal relationship. We want to try to show businesses at scale, right? We want to take a very big macro problem and at a very micro basis, use technology to kind of influence businesses door to door, but using technology to do that. And that's how we do it.
Yeah,
We've gotten a couple of thousand restaurants now around the world that have taken our pledge without ever lifting the phone or calling anybody or visiting them. I mean, I go out to eat, but like without really doing that as a business, we've gotten thousands of restaurants to sign on to our platform, claim their business listings, and take a pledge to introduce and improve the quality of their plant-based options. And we're doing the same thing with consumer products brands this year.
Very cool. I think one of the biggest things was, on the consumer side of things, when you saw, particularly in the United States, Burger King and all the fast food chains that, were traditionally, first people wanted more real ingredients, to put it mildly, in their products, but also there was a large plant-based option that people wanted to see, Impossible and Beyond Meat competing for, the Impossible Whopper or some of the other options that are out there, not just for plant-based consumers, but also for, consumers of meat that just want to have, a Beyond Burger sometimes. We're going to open up the floor to Q&A in a few minutes. I just want to cover a few more areas real quickly. COVID-19, what's the impact been on all of your businesses, and has that impacted any timelines in terms of launching new things, moving things up, or do you really is it business as usual for you guys? Andrew, we'll start with you because I know you guys launched the home unit in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah, so working with hospitality and corporate cafeterias and schools, obviously it's things have kind of paused for that for all of Q2. And with that, we saw just the consumer demand that had been pretty strong just quadruple pretty much overnight of like inbounds that we were getting. And so with that, we just accelerated our timeline to launch the consumer product that had always kind of been on our roadmap. And what's important about that for us is as we scale manufacturing and continue to iterate on the technology, we bring the price point and the accessibility, we bring the price point down, the accessibility up, and also are able to continue to invest, increasing the yield of a single system. Therefore making it, a solution that makes sense, to have in more and more places as time goes on. And so it's been tough to go through with having everyone, remote, and also being here in Brooklyn and as a company really being impacted by that. And even tragically losing one of our first education partners to COVID, which is really tough for the team. And just an incredible educator that impacted so many lives and was actually our first education client. So it's been tough to manage those things, of managing the emotional aspects of going through all this, along with the business, and still getting after that vision and the way that you want to serve people. And so it's been trying to hold those both well, and really support the team and make sure that they're being taken care of, and that we can get on to the next stage of driving the impact that those people that have invested in us, including Des and Romain, really get to see that their investment was not taken to another level.
Yeah, and I think most people, it's sad to hear that, the impact to companies. I mean, a lot of people think it's just the top and bottom line consumer behavior, but there's a whole emotional impact too, particularly if you lose somebody to the virus that's an early advocate for the brand. Stuart, I want to flip to you real quick. You guys have a lot of projects in the pipeline all over the world. What's the impact been, considering that you're in Beijing? Beijing was going through some lockdowns recently. What's the impact been on your business?
It's really accelerated interest. I think, again, going back to kind of what I said at the beginning about convenience and resilience, at the government level, the kind of resilience and kind of capacity building is at like the top of their agenda. So last week I had calls. Every day was a different call with a different government from a different African country. So I had calls with Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Botswana, with people from Namibia, from Zimbabwe, Zambia, South Africa. And then last night, this morning, was with Saudi Arabia, so the Middle East. And, they're willing to make an early investment into these kinds of technologies in order to kind of be better prepared for the next one. And so it's really, I think the difficult thing, particularly kind of being in China, is the cycle of the booms and busts for ag tech. Since the past 7 years I've been doing this, has been tied to things like a pandemic or like a food safety crisis or an outbreak. And so whenever these things happen, it's like, oh, the supply chain, has areas that can be improved, or, we should be careful about the quality of something. And so, we're like counter-cyclical in that whenever there's something like a pandemic, the interest in the industry, whether it's from investors, customers, partners, increases significantly more than when it's business as usual. So from that perspective, the interest in the tech has been incredible. And so, which is why, we're just about to finalize some of these kind of much bigger scale projects in China. And coincidentally, you guys are talking about Chengdu, but the first project will be in Chengdu.
Very cool. Vikas,
nice.
So considering that you guys work with a lot of F&B and restaurants and everything, the outlook for that industry, not just in the US, but pretty much in every country in the world is pretty bleak. We're going to lose, staggering numbers of restaurants. How does that impact your platform?
Yeah. So our hearts go out to folks in the F&B industry. It's bleak, and there's just, talk about businesses that have had to really adjust and get on delivery platforms and do all sorts of other things. It's nice to see that in a lot of places that things are starting to reopen, although slowly and very cautiously. And for us, Q2 was our best quarter ever. July is going to go down as our best month ever and single best days and weeks ever for our platform. While F&B has always been a very core thing, and we're really, our product, our app is 2 years old. We started off with this very simple idea is like, let's help people find vegan dishes. The first thing we're going to do is people travel, people want to find, if people want to find vegan food where they're going, let's help them find the best vegan dishes. They can exist at steakhouses, they can exist at vegan restaurants maybe, right? But let's basically, in a way, create a vegan meritocracy for where vegan food lives. And that was kind of an interesting idea that let's not focus on restaurant reviews, let's focus on individual dishes. But about a year into it, I'd call it April, May of last year, we actually launched consumer products. And so, that was, for us, that was something that had to do with, simply like, you go to Whole Foods today, there's 100 plant-based cheeses, and I have no idea which ones to choose. Like, one might, one melts, the other one doesn't bake, the other one turns into paper, some mysteriously float in your pan, they fall off of whatever you're melting them on your burger. And so the thing is, there's very little consumer information, consumer awareness around a lot of these new products that are coming to market. There's no shortage of new products coming to market every single day. And we also think that it's a massively untapped market today. If you look at it just in North America, you spend $250 billion a year on packaged food advertising, of which 40% is digital, and that's growing 8 to 10% a year. And there's really not a great digital platform in the sustainability space. And when you think about, we think of, when we add up food, packaged foods, travel, experience, like when we add in a lot of different areas of the market, like cosmetics and fashion, and we start to think about what segment of that pie, of that $5-6 trillion pie, will be focused on sustainability, even if it's 3 or 4 or 5%, if we can be the digital platform for that, to capture that, we're really excited about that. So we started consumer products reviews in about April, May of last year. Today we've got probably a bigger database globally than Amazon does of consumer products, and it's all been contributed by our users. So we have 80,000 individual consumer products across about 25,000 brands that have been reviewed on our platform. And the big shift that we saw as COVID started to hit, and as it really started to force people to stay at home, was we went from like 60-70% people reviewing vegan dishes at restaurants to like 80% people reviewing products, and that has just accelerated. So that's really helped us. It was never meant to be a hedge, but it's acted as a really good hedge during this time, and continue. I think at the end of the day, I look at F&B. I never thought of F&B as a profit center for our business. I always thought of F&B and trying to deal with mom and pop restaurants and even chains as kind of a loss leader over time. But the consumer product side of it, working with big CPG companies, or big or small CPG companies that have marketing budgets, that's much more of a focus for us longer term. So we're happy to see that taking off during this time.
Yeah, and we just saw the news. If anyone's been following the news, Oatly getting the massive valuation
from Blackstone.
From Blackstone, $2 billion valuation on that company. We're going to open up the floor to Q&A, but real quickly, it is Startup Grind. We always like to talk about the entrepreneurial journey. So very quickly, Andrew, you were working at Twitter and Pinterest before this, in social media. Both Stuart and Vikas, you guys came from the banking and finance industry. So I guess, Andrew, how do you go from social media into becoming an urban farmer?
I had a quick stint in banking before all that. So banker, ad sales, farmer. Don't worry. Just wanted to make sure I checked that box. If the numbers don't add up, the dream is hard to make happen. Yeah. Started collecting Pinterest boards on how to grow my own food, tried to do it, and realized that there was a lot of misinformation in technology and other industries that when applied to this problem could change not only what's possible from a cost and a sustainability perspective, but a flavor perspective and an experience. And so with that level of naivete, left Pinterest and started a indoor farming company in a garage in San Francisco. Startup stereotypes, garage, San Francisco, check. Before moving the company to New York for a startup accelerator with BMW Mini Cooper. But yeah, so it's been a crazy journey, as it is, I think, for all of us, discovering new parts of the business as well as having to grow in other areas personally. But it's great to have friends, family, coworkers, partners, and investors along the way that just make it all possible. And realize I might have forgot to mention She1K, who's Singapore, Hong Kong, New York based, found us and really loved the product, and that we were so lucky to have investors like She1K and others that have really just come alongside us and really believe in what we're doing and want to see that future just as much as we do.
Right. Stuart, I remember looking at the sketches on paper with you years ago in Singapore having brunch, and to see, you've done deals now, the government of Dubai, You've spoken at the World Economic Forum. Just what's the journey been like for you going from banking and finance over, to being an urban farmer?
I think the great thing about the agricultural industry, and maybe this is also maybe the downside of it, is that post World War II, there's a lot of economic incentives that were provided to the industry, and that incentive helped to make sure that people weren't going hungry, which is fantastic. But also what it did was it prevented a lot of innovation from happening. So what's most exciting for me was that when I looked at the agriculture industry, there was a lot of potential areas for innovation and impact, which, it's very difficult to do in other more technical industries like brain surgery or maybe like even things related to computer science. And so the opportunity for impact was incredible. And then the other thing was, the reason why we started with these modular systems was because of the distribution inequality that was brought up earlier. And so, we wanted to find ways in which we can integrate this technology in any city, not just in affluent cities, but in many other places around the world. And so, from a perspective from banking to this, it's like the amount of joy that I get, and also the amount of opportunity that this entrepreneurial journey has provided has been incredible. The World Economic Forum is great, but to be able to present to some of my entrepreneurial heroes, very early on we got a chance to meet with Bill Gates, and then a couple years back we got to present to Jeff Bezos. But it's hard to kind of connect the dots and saying, oh, I bet these things will happen. But kind of looking back and reflecting, and the kind of individuals in both government and also in private enterprise that are interested in this topic and that are willing to be a champion of it is very encouraging. And honestly, this job is almost like, I feel like it's a better version of the Red Cross. You get to do and build great technology, and you get praised for doing it. Like, it's the greatest thing.
Yeah, it's great stuff that you're doing. And Vikas, you had mentioned real quick, and then I'm going to go over to John, who's got a question for you. But you mentioned you left a job that you really love to start this, as a passion project and really grow it. So how did you go from being in banking and finance into starting a tech company, basically?
Yeah. Look, I think I started working. I started working on Wall Street when I was 14, and I was just always really good with math. And there wasn't really a rhyme or reason. I probably saw a lot of young guys wearing nice suits, and I just figured, didn't have a lot of money, and this was going to be the best way to pay off college loans and all of that. And that's kind of why I went in to the industry, because it was the most high-paying job at the time. And yeah, I fell in love with it, and I kind of felt like I had gotten to the stage that I had always dreamed when I was a teenager, that I would like one day have like whatever this, the title and all of this other stuff. And I just kind of felt like, wow, like this is kind of starting to feel like a huge waste of time. I just started to feel like, wow, I'm like in my early 30s, and am I really going to do this now? Am I going to like start business in this space and do this for the next 30 or 40 years and work with the people around the room? And I just, again, no knock on finance, but I just felt like, because I shouldn't spend the rest of my life doing something because I made a decision when I was like a teenager. And I started to really reflect on if there was anything that I could do, what's going to give me the best shot at being successful. Because if I'm not going to do this, that means I'm going to do something completely new, which I have no effing clue how to do. Right. And so I just really came back to like the things that I'm really passionate about in life. And I grew up vegetarian since birth. So it's always been kind of part of my DNA, asking questions, trying to find vegetarian food. When I became vegan, after being vegetarian, it was still very, very hard for me. It felt very compromising. It felt sacrificial. And then at some point, it became one of the most inspiring things that I've ever done in my life. Extremely enabling, has really helped me connect with, the world, and really purpose. And I think, education similarly, I'm a product of the New York City public school system. And I just felt like, this was a mission that brought together all the things that I really care about in terms of education, in terms of animals, in terms of everything. And that if I had a shot at doing something, this might be a thing. And I love platform businesses. So I felt like there's a ton of growth in the sustainability space. There's going to be a ton of companies growing in this space, building in this space, whether it's food or cosmetics or fashion or shoes. And there's an opportunity to really create an ecosystem around that. So once I started thinking along those lines, it was kind of hard for me to stop.
Yeah, it's we hear that a lot. People taking things from their childhood that they loved or passions and turning that into business opportunities. Okay, so we're going to open up the floor right now to Q&A. Long John, I'm going to unmute you right now. So you're allowed to. There you are. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks. First, very nice to see Stuart. I've saw him on the news many times. This is the first time I get to hear him live. Yeah, so I was really wow to see him. And also to Andrew, I managed to visit Farm Shelf as from NUS previously in about 2017. We got to meet your CTO. I remember we got to see the unit, and it was great. So I'm from Singapore, and I'm extremely interested in urban farming. I've worked in a farm, and right now I'm still exploring the same. And my biggest question to you all will be, will you guys ever come to Singapore? So the thing that, thanks to COVID, that a lot of Singaporeans are extremely interested in farming right now, especially with the 30 by 30 plan. Previously, it wasn't going on. People were skeptical. They are thinking, is food grown by hydroponics safe with all the LED lights and everything? But now people are taking great interest. So there are many local farms starting up. But I think it would be fantastic if they were to have companies from overseas coming in as well to contribute to the ideas, the innovations, and everything.
Yeah, from that perspective, one, things have changed a lot since 2017. So next time you're in New York, come back. It looks a little bit different in the office. It's crazy how much 3 years, that is such a long time ago. That was like our first unit ever in 2017, which scares me now thinking about how that thing was built. With going overseas, I think for us, it's been, we've received lots of great interest from the Middle East and different parts of Asia, but it's been finding the right partner and someone willing to make us a more sizable investment, because while there's a lot of talk and interest, there's no one in those markets that's been willing to commit as much as we've seen in the US. And even looking at Dubai, which from a luxury perspective, people are like, that's great. But then you look at the population, income brackets, and you're like, the US makes more sense still. And so I think it's like you need to scale these technologies in order to make them available to more and more people. And we've seen a hesitancy from funds to invest in some of what we think are more novel and cutting edge approaches from overseas, and that are really following in behind on larger ag tech plays like Bowery and Plenty, which makes sense because they've been validated by VCs. But this is we've not raised any capital from venture capitalists, given kind of the way that we want to build this company, and finding just kind of advocates that have gotten us to where we are. And so it's really been an investment and partner reason that we haven't gone overseas.
I see.
Yeah, so I guess real quick, we are in Singapore. We did a small project in Jurong Innovation District with JTC Corporation, and our lead investor is from Singapore. So Singapore is definitely one of our target markets. It's our entry into Southeast Asia. So we'll be going into Singapore in a much bigger way pretty soon. But kind of going off of what Andrew said, finding the right partner is all we care about. It's really, agriculture is one of those things. It's not like consumer tech. It's not like a cell phone or even a car for that matter. But even in those two cases, having the right local partner that can help you distribute and help you get in front of the right people, both in the government, but also in front of businesses and consumers, is a pretty important thing. And in China's case, we spent over 2 years finding the right partner. In the Middle East, we spent at least 2 years finding. Probably in the first 4 months, I met with 600 different people and companies and in the end, we were working with only one of them. And on the African continent, it's the same thing. So of like the hundreds of people that were introduced to us or that came through and requested to work together, we're literally working with 3 of them. So, it requires, both kind of your visions to be aligned, but also for them to be able to bring several key components to the table that allow us to not just kind of have a nice agreement in place, but to actually scale and to be successful, on the ground locally.
Great. Thanks, Longjian, for the question. Gonna call right now on Abhinav Gatum. You're on right now with the panel.
Hey everybody, great to hear from you. I'm currently running a affordable cold storage company in Rwanda, and I'm also a director here for Startup Brand. My question was directed towards Stuart. I'm just curious to hear what's your view, or what do you think of the trends on hydroponics or indoor farming in general for Africa pre-COVID and maybe post-COVID? You mentioned you got some interest, so just curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've been in China since 2011, and I fly about 60 or 70 times a year, which isn't great for the environment. But what I've learned, at least from all this traveling, has been that there is a lot of opportunities that people are overlooking, particularly like on the African continent and in Southeast Asia. With the African continent, when I was in South Africa, speaking with some individuals that were working at supermarkets in Zimbabwe and also in Nigeria, I found out that there's a membership-based WhatsApp group where people from the supermarket will like leak information about when fresh produce is going to hit their shelves, so that this membership WhatsApp group can like rush to go get fresh produce. And when we talk about like distribution inequality and access inequality, these are the kind of the things that we're trying to stomp out. And so, in terms of the whether we can reach their price point today is maybe a different story. But in terms of the demand and the interest in the technology, it's very, very high. And our goal is by the end of next year to have systems that we can deploy at scale that will also kind of meet the financial requirements and some of the challenges around operational costs on the African continent. So, we're really, really excited about the partnerships that we have. And we're looking to obviously expand those partnerships across the African continent.
And I
Thanks.
think,
Great. Thanks, Abhinav. Mary Xiao, you are on with the panel right now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for sharing. I'm actually based in Dubai. I have 2 questions for Stuart and Andrew. The first one is, are you guys profitable? Do you mind sharing? And I look at both of your websites. It looks like the portals or service that you're providing look similar to me.
Oh, Maria, are you still there?
Kidding. With the startup in the stage that we're at, if we were profitable, that would mean that we thought that we shouldn't be profitable. And I think the reason for that is that would mean that we're leaving expansion opportunity on the table when there's a limited competition. And that the technology has been developed to its kind of full degree. I think one of the confusing things for me, at least when starting Farm Shelf, was like talking about, here's how we hit cash flow positive and this is the plan to do that. And then you're like, oh, but if you then look at it and go, how could I go faster, grow this company faster and really drive like, a world impact, being profitable this early from a, overall perspective doesn't make as much sense. Like the operating business and the individual, like sale of the units, yes, we're profitable on that. And competitive nature between, Alaska Life and Farm Shelf. I won't speak for Stuart and maybe let him answer that question as well, or be curious to hear his perspective. But we focus on the US. There's going to be multiple companies that win in this space, and we do not actually sell to grocery stores. We actively avoid that market because our user is really that, in the home or in a chef, whether it's in the home or in a restaurant, as opposed to someone at a grocery store.
Yeah, so I guess from our perspective, so we're not profitable either. We're planning to be profitable after our next kind of material fundraise. So before that cash runs out. In terms of competitiveness, the one thing that I'll say, well, there's two things, I guess. One is that I think the common maybe misconception is that one company in the space, their success is another company's loss. Like, we're talking about a market space that is ever expanding. We're talking about people that are becoming more affluent. We're talking about more people in general, but we're also talking about more people becoming better educated, making more conscious decisions about eating healthier. And so, this market space is ever expanding. And it's also one of the most recession-proof spaces. And so from that perspective, I was talking to Curtis earlier, but I'm dying for companies like Farm Shelf and Andrew to be successful. And and also in terms of kind of the geographic split as well, it's almost like if you have a power plant in America, is that more, does that create competition for power plants in France or in China? A lot of these kind of operations, because of kind of the nature of the product, is quite geofenced. And so, our target markets are vastly different from most of our competitors. And so whether we go to parts of Africa or parts of the Middle East or even in China, we're working in a space that has very few competitors. And even with the competitors that exist here, even with all of us becoming, like, let's say 1,000 times bigger, we couldn't possibly service the size of this market. So, we look at competition in very different ways. And the more companies in this space that are successful only validates the technology, and will hopefully attract even, individuals and investors and companies that require significantly more proof in order to adopt the technology. People that are far, far down on the adoption curve will come online as kind of the early adopters and the champions prove that the technology is both sustainable and both from an economic standpoint, but also from an environmental perspective as well.
And it's unfortunate that more startups that are kind of working on similar technologies can't partner together because of the way that sometimes investors look at that from a competitive perspective.
Right.
Because there is so much that we're both doing that's like, wow, you're building that and I'm building that, and we don't both need to build it. But it's looked at, and I get why investors look at it a certain way, but it seems like with how big these markets are in different countries, there should be more advanced ways for early stage startups, or startups in general, to partner in similar spaces.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're also trying to do is to open source parts of our tech. And it just really, there's, given our team size and given kind of the pace of innovation that would excite us, like, there's only so much that we can do by holding on to the stuff that we have. And, so building modularity into our hardware system so that anybody can kind of take it to the next level. And these are kind of things that we're also discussing as well. Like, how can we provide our software and open source it, or how do we provide our hardware and open source it so that people can build on top of what we've already kind of created as a foundation, are also ways in which we're trying to find ways to scale the impact that we want to see as well.
Great. That answer your question, Maria?
Yes, thank you. Interesting perspective. Just a quick follow up for Stuart. You mentioned you were in Dubai.
Yeah, yes, we have an operation in Dubai. Yes.
And okay, do you mind telling me where it is?
Yeah, so we did a small project at Emirates Towers, and the system that we have right now, it's almost like an R&D system, but it's at Sustainable City. So if you're interested in visiting, I'm happy to connect you to our teams there to give you a tour.
Yeah, definitely interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Do we got any more questions? Anyone want to put their hand up? I did have one question come in here on the chat, and I'll just read that, and I think we'll make this our last question. In the context of demand for plant-based substitutes worldwide, and in the context of meeting 30% of nutritional security by 2030 in Singapore, what prospective areas are you guys visualizing in terms of production of safer agricultural products, marketing, and logistics in Singapore? So the question kind of centers around food security, food safety. Vikas, you're in Singapore, so feel free to kind of chime in on that, since you're the only one in Singapore right now on the panel. But I guess the question really centers around food safety and how can we make the food safer this way?
Well, I can start. I think it's a really ambitious target. To put it into context, the current rate we're at 10% right now. So we're at 10%, and we need to go to 30% in 9 or 10 years. So I think it's a very ambitious target. It's going to require a lot of different things: indoor farming, vertical farming. These are all solutions, potential solutions. Higher nutrient dense foods that again can be grown in these places. So instead of people eating iceberg lettuce, they should be eating kale, and they should be eating the kind of kale that is extremely nutrient dense, and which can be grown in controlled environments. So that's going to be a big part of it. And I think consumer awareness has to also be a big part of it. And food waste, Singapore is a city. So back to Andrew's point that 30% of food is wasted in cities, and we need to do something about that, right?
Definitely think people shouldn't be eating iceberg lettuce, not to pick on iceberg lettuce too much, but there is a whole medley of greens out there that are way better to be eating than iceberg, like kale and stuff. Andrew, if you guys want to chime in on that, the safety aspect, and I guess because there's no pesticides in the vegetables grown in your units, it is a little bit safer in that sense.
Stuart, you want to lead off this time?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, safety is actually the number one concern for China. As there's been quite a number of very public food safety issues, and this isn't something that's unique to China or any country for that matter. There's been food safety issues in America or Japan, and all across Europe, and so it's not just really a China thing. But from a consumer perspective, over 90% of people that are surveyed every single year by Pew Research say that food safety is their number one or pesticide use and chemical use on food is their number one concern. And so we try to the consumers don't really care that it's hydroponic. In fact, they don't even really care that it's indoors. So they don't care that it's grown under LEDs. They care that it's safe, that it's nutritious, and that it's flavorful. And so these are kind of the areas that we try to communicate as effectively as possible. But we're also trying to figure out more unique ways and business models as well. Like one of our moonshots is to actually be able to give away our food for free. And so we're trying to find a small partnership that we're trying to form right now, actually in Singapore, is how can we work with the right people where we can give the food away for free and not be, like a charity food bank. So if we really want to democratize things, if you put an economic value on it, then it excludes at least some people. And so we're trying to find ways in which not only can we open source the tech, but are there kind of partners that we can work with today that can deliver the same quality food that we're growing in our indoor farm today that is going to 5-star hotels, and can we give it to, let's say, every public school? Can we make the highly nutritious food available for anybody that's going to these public schools? And at the end of the day, food safety is the most important, because it doesn't matter how nutritious the food is if it makes you sick. So we make sure that this is to the highest degree. We work with a lot of third-party agencies to check the material. So all the steels that we use, the plastics that we use, the seeds, the fertilizer, we do periodic tests and provide them to all of our hotel and restaurant partners, all the time. We want to make sure that to the highest degree of transparency, we can prove that our food is as advertised. It's chemical free, or it's pesticide free.
Is it
There's a lot of
100% organic? Somebody just asked that question in a chat to me. Is it 100%?
It's a bigger conversation. I feel that it's hard to answer. Because there's so many different definitions, and it's just someone trying to label it for marketing purposes. But at the end of the day, what do we care about?
Yeah.
Affordable, good tasting, responsibly grown food that doesn't have poison sprayed on it. And so it comes down to the logistics costs, the cost of growing it, the flavor, and getting people to know about it. And so by them seeing where their food comes from, that can change so much. Stuart was talking about unique funding sources and ways to give away food. Why aren't we looking at landscaping budgets for cities and being how cool would it be if that wall that looks pretty in a city feeds that block? And the funny thing is like we've been thinking about this in like the architecture space. If you look at some of the crazier like dreamscapes of cities, they've been thinking about it for so long, and now it's the opportunity with technology and the right partnerships, I think, to create those experiences that change what's possible. And it makes you excited to see a bunch of entrepreneurs that are, and companies that all are like, hey, status quo is no longer okay, just making money and like doing it that way. Like we can do that, and we can do so much more. And so getting to like see that happening around the world is like, for me, exciting, and it's going to make the rest of the day that much better. Maybe the rest of the night for out in Asia that much better.
Yeah. So this is a very worldwide audience. We're going to have to leave it there, guys. We could probably keep going for a little bit longer on this topic, particularly what qualifies as organic or not. And if anybody's interested in that, go check out what you can get away with USDA organic certification. I learned that recently. It's pretty interesting stuff, reading about all the different labels around the country, or around the world for that matter. But I just want to give a big thanks to Vikas, Stuart, and Andrew. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules, day or night, depending on where you are, to join us at Startup Grind. We really appreciate it. And just a final quick thing before we go, the next next virtual fireside chat for Startup Grind Singapore, July 30th, with Gio Lang. She is the co-founder and CEO of The Great Room in Singapore. We're going to talk about the co-working spaces and the future of work. It's live on the Startup Grind Singapore website, startupgrind.com/Singapore. You can book your ticket there now. Thank you so much, everybody, and we hope you all have a great evening. Bye now.